This week on the Storycraft Society, we're going to be making a ruined watchtower that's going to be my version of Agatha's Lair. Welcome to the channel, everybody. My name is Garmin, and this is the Storycraft Society. If you're new to the channel, over the last couple of months, we've been crafting all the terrain that you're going to need for a Lost Mine of Phandelver adventure. I'll be sure to put links in the video description below to playlists of what we've done so far here on the channel, as well as links to a couple of original adventures that we've released over on DriveThruRPG that utilize all the terrain that we've been crafting here on the channel. But this week, we're going to be working on Agatha's Lair. And what's really cool about this week's video, at least in my opinion, is that I start the process from having no idea what I'm doing all the way to a finished product. So hopefully that's fun to watch. Let's get to watching it. So before we start diving into planning the physical part of our build, the actual sketch of what we're going to be doing, I think we need to talk about one kind of overlooked part of building, which is the flavor of what we're trying to go for in our build. So let's start with what we know. We know that Agatha's Lair is northwest of the town of Conyberry, which was sacked by barbarians a long time ago. We also know that it's covered in kind of a woven mesh of branches over the top. And we also know that Agatha, who is cursed to be there, is very well informed, and she can answer one question that our players ask her if they play their cards right. So the one thing that the book doesn't tell us is it doesn't tell us who Agatha was in life, and I think that's very important. So in my version of Agatha, I think she was the watch captain of Conyberry, and I think in Undeath, she is so well informed because she was also very well informed in life. So I think in my version of Agatha, she had scouts all over the place and she had her nose in everybody's business and she was proud of herself. I also think that this was the last place she was in life. So I think I'm going to make this lair an old watchtower. And maybe this was the watchtower that Agatha was in when she looked out into the expanse and saw the massive barreling horde of barbarians coming towards Conyberry, but she didn't see this coming. And she knew that it was too late and she wasn't going to be able to warn the people that she was sworn to protect. So now she will spend forever cursed to this site, this old destroyed watchtower. So now let's get into kind of sketching this old abandoned watchtower out. All right, so I think we're going to start with kind of a rectangular base, something like this. And then I'm going to do the base of the watchtower maybe like this, right? We'll put a doorway here because there is mention in the book of a low doorway. There's going to be kind of wood planked flooring that run all through the bottom of it, and maybe the remnants of some stairs that would have started to go up the watchtower over here. And then just to make this area a little bit more visually interesting, maybe we'll do like a kind of brick paved walkway. It was maybe originally more uniform, but then it starts to break up into pieces off this way. And then we'll have kind of tufts of grass out in here. And as the players come in, they'll kind of have to make their way up this path and into this structure here. There we go. One more thing before we actually get into this build. The book does talk about a woven mesh of branches in kind of a dome-like structure over top of Agatha's Lair. I think that that's a really cool thing for you to describe to your players, but it's always a really important thing as a DM, someone who's crafting to run a game, that you remember that you're going to be using minis in this area. So I'm going to choose while I'm doing this build to actually not do the woven dome of branches. And that's something that I can just describe to my players. They will be able to see it in their mind's eye. Really what they need is just the lower map. So be smart about what you choose to build in relationship to being able to place miniatures inside of this in the future. All right, let's get to building. So one thing that I'm realizing actually is that the footprint of this is a little smaller just visually than I thought it would be. So putting a staircase in, or a crumbling staircase, I think is going to it's going to take up too much of the floor space. So let's keep going. Okay, so we have the door that's going to go here, and I'm thinking that down on this lower level we need arrow slits, one that goes here, one that goes here, and one that goes there, just because if this was a watchtower it needs to be defendable. But I'm only going to do partial here and here. Maybe I'll try to do the whole one back here just because the wall will go a little bit higher, because the whole piece is going to kind of crumble to the front. So that's next. So let's figure some windows out. All right, so the next step is going to be, we know that the tower crumbled. I'm thinking it fell this direction. So I'm just gonna place a couple of pieces around here, maybe just one or two broken pieces kind of around here of stonework potentially fell off and then broke up into pieces. So we're gonna try that next, a couple of those, and then we'll be ready to move on. So before we start really tricking this thing out with all kinds of cool, like grass tufts and all that stuff that's gonna really bring it to life, we've got to get the Mod Podge on to get this undercoated, and then we've got to get all of the basic parts of it painted. So that is our next step. Let's get to it. All right, our Mod Podge is dry, so now we're ready to get on to painting. And I just kind of want to share my thoughts about what I'm going to be doing for my paint scheme. A while ago, Jeremy from Blackmagic Craft made a video that was all about color choice. And yes, you can choose to paint with, if you're doing stone, you can choose to do just grays. When you're doing woods, you can do browns and only browns. And I think that that will turn out totally fine. But you can do so many more things if you take the time to think about the colors that you're shooting for and maybe the feeling of the piece that you're trying to make, and then start working out from there. So for this is a Banshee's lair. So I don't want to necessarily just go with my standard like grays for stone and browns for wood. I want to try and come up with cool ways to make that feel darker. So I'm actually going to be undercoating the stone using purple. And what that's going to do is make the shadows and all of that feel very eerie and dark. Then do my main wet brushing in a gray. And then I'm going to actually do a kind of a moldy green color as my highlight. And what that should do, we'll see if it works out once I get the paint on there, is make the piece feel like it's stone, but just more interesting. So we're going to start with that, and we're going to see where we get. Let's paint it up. for my dirt, I'm going to actually be going with a charcoal gray, a brown that I'm going to be mixing with a pewter gray, and then that same brown actually, and a granite gray. What I'm thinking is I just want the ground to be kind of gray, and there isn't a whole lot of life in the soil here. So I'm going with, instead of my usual browns for the dirt, I'm going with browns and grays. All right, so we are now done with our painting. It's starting to look good, and we need to start doing up our flocks. Now, I'm gonna be doing two different types of flocks on this particular piece. I'm gonna be doing a mix of this blended turf and kind of a clump foliage brown to make grass and kind of scrub brush all along the base here. And then I'm going to be using a pea green fine turf to do more like moss and growth that's happening up on the stones. So we're gonna get those mixed up. I'm gonna mix them up in these cups, make like a little paste out of them, and then start smearing them on, make them look good. All right. I realized actually that I mixed up a little bit too much, and I was going to do more like rubble and, broken up crumbling debris and stuff inside, but now I'm thinking that maybe it could be that this thing is so old and that grass and stuff is starting to grow up through the wood planks. As the wood planks decompose, grass and stuff is coming back up. So I'm actually going to take some more of this stuff, and I'm going to put a couple of patches of this even inside of the tower instead of doing debris. We'll see how it goes. So next up is we're going to be taking kind of an olivish green. It's actually the burnt grass from Woodland Scenics, but fine turf, and we're going to mix that up in the exact same way that we did this other flock, but then we're going to be placing it around on the stones to be like moss growing in and on the stones. So let's get on to that. All right, so enough time has passed that our flock is all dried up, and we've got some spooky looking grass. It's really looking great, exactly what I wanted it to look like. So the next thing up is going through our tufts box and getting this thing fully dressed out so that it's got all of the things that make this piece really come to life. Let's finish this thing up. Can I actually just take a second and say that these World War Scenics tufts are literally the most amazing tufts I've ever used. They're so good. This isn't a sponsored video, but this is like my favorite grass type. So good. To everybody who's been watching these videos, it means the world to me. Thank you so much. If you are enjoying this content, please consider subscribing and ringing the notification bell. That way you know when our videos go live every week. Leave a like down below. That goes a super long way. In the comments section, I would like to hear from everybody. If you were going to build Agathas' lair, where would you place it? Would you put it in a watchtower like this, or would you put it in a cave or like a forest nook or a hag's hut? I'd like to hear what everybody's suggestions are down there. But that's all I have for this week's video. So until next week, I'll be seeing you.